Hey, Steelers Nation. First off, I appreciate everyone leaving comments for players that you want me to break down in this upcoming draft. That will be coming up in both Wednesdays and Thursdays episodes. So if there's someone that you want me to get, make sure you hit it at me now because I want to make sure that we can talk about them. And then next week, I'm going to go through some of the mocks to kind of really get us ready for draft week next week. So with that being said, though, I do want to take a chance here to break down an important conversation that came out in a couple of episodes. It's been sparked around here in the comments. And that is who the Steelers truly need to be focusing on and how to beat them. So when I look at this realistically, even though basically my life, the target has been slaying the Ravens have killed themselves. I mean, there's just no way around that. I know they just signed OBJ, and he's the first real receiver who's ever wanted to play with Lamar. He's really just someone who had no other choice and just wanted a job when you look at that objectively. They aren't going to be able to do anything successfully in the long run. They're not just a time bomb down there. They are a lit stick of dynamite. Like, that thing's blowing up, and it's going to be ugly. It's going to be very ugly because you don't pay a running back top 3 quarterback money. And OBJ is going to realize he doesn't throw a good ball and the entire thing's going to explode. I really hope it happens here. That would be amazing, but we'll see. So that being said, the real target that we have to overcome is the Bengals. There is no way around that. So I'm going to start with recapping the games last year. Last offseason, the 2022 offseason, the Bengals basically bought an offensive line. And then during preseason, they didn't let them play together at all. One of those teams that said, you don't need to practice to be good. You should be good because of your resume. All right. Well, we all saw what happened. Burrow got destroyed. Something like 5 sacks. TJ Watt owned him. Oh, by the way, how was that performance reminiscent not of the year that Troy got that pick against Tennessee after the Super Bowl and he was out for the year, and then after that, just boom, Troy was on fire? I'm really hoping that was a TJ thing because TJ sacking like crazy, got the interception, and there's something about taking football away. Even though he was back at the end of the year, he was not truly healthy, and it was very obvious by the film study. I believe he's going to be a different man on fire this year. So that being said, he doesn't play the second time against Cincinnati. Both times the games were relatively close, but it was very apparent that we could not cover the trio of Boyd, Higgins, and Chase. We can't. The only way we ever slowed the Bengals down was when we blew up Burrow. So that leaves a possibility of victory, blowing up Burrow, with a distinct, obvious problem. You can't cover the right receivers. Okay. They're possibly the best wide receiver room in the NFL. We're not the only people with this problem. The joy that we have, though, is we don't need a blitz to do it. So when we go overall, how do we draw up a game plan to beat these Cincinnati Bengals? Let's look at option A, getting the pressure on Burrow. Well, there's a couple of ways to do it. You already have some of the best foundations in place. They have the best receiving core. We have the best 2 edge rushers in football. So let TJ, let Highsmith run wild. Cam is an amazing pressure spot up the middle. Way you can add to this is you can either A, get TJ Watt dash outside linebacker insurance, first round elite edge rusher. That way, if TJ would get hurt and or in those situations when TJ takes himself off the field, which again, not a criticism because when he's out there, he's absolutely amazing. But he goes so hard, he doesn't do plays at half speed. He like mentally doesn't allow that of himself, which is fine. That's how he chooses to go. He's going a billion miles an hour when he is out there. If that's the byproduct cost of it, so be it. But knowing that that's how he rolls getting an elite pass rusher to also have out there, that can't hurt. So therefore, there's never a play whenever the Bengals know there's only 2 pass rushers coming at us. Because Highsmith never came off the field. It was amazing. It really was. So it's like old school Harrison type stuff. And when I say elite pass rusher, Buddy's not it. I mean, I mean someone who could develop into the string of this. This unbeatable, too many people coming at us. We have to throw the ball short. Because if you throw the ball short, Higgins and Chase can't run behind you. And then it just comes down to can your safeties tackle. And we got Minka, who can tackle anything. I mean, he led the team in tackles 2 years ago and basically did last year. So that's not a concern. The team is really built overall to get to the pass rusher, and that would be an argument for going edge rusher 1 overall, or at least defensive pressure. A much greater initial benefit would be if you trade up, and I get that this is all really about the trade up conversation. We trade up into the top 10. Where we go and how we get for it isn't really there. But there's 2 names I'll throw in here. We're basically talking about, do we go for Gonzalez, the absolute best stud receiver who has a chance of being Rod Woodson? He does. The dude's amazing. Or are we going for the Georgia defensive tackle who is basically unblockable and the second coming of Cam? Not necessarily personality-wise, but on the field-wise. And the question is fundamentally asking, what helps this team more today? In Steelers Nation, there's not a wrong answer to this one. I am more inclined for the internal pass rush, and the reason is because we already know that TJ requires at least 2 people to block him. We know that Cam destroys a single team, and so does Highsmith. So they basically each require 1.5, if not more, 2. If you get a third person up there who can just destroy a single coverage block, and you can't put a guard on him, you need to give him help. You basically now are having 8 people block on every single play, and we'd be requiring defenses to play 1990s football against the speed of our secondary. We win that. If you only put 3 people on a route because you have 8 blocking, Minka and anyone can double team someone out of the game, let alone Peterson as the main corner there. So the pass rusher destroys everything. And that doesn't just blow up the Bengals. That messes up virtually every offense in the world, unless your quarterback can handle a gajillion hits and keep on rolling, a la Big Ben whenever we were playing Baltimore back in the day. Like, that's the kind of pressure that we could be getting. Now, again, you got to trade up to get them, but that's where we're at here. Option 2, we just got Peterson. That pass rush we already have seen is amazing when TJ's out there. They get sacks, they put pressure on. Do we really need to take it up to 11? Argument's fair there. There's talent there if Highsmith and Watt don't get hurt. You have Peterson who can shut someone down. You put Gonzalez on Higgins. Well, now you gonna try to beat us with Boyd all day? I don't think so. I'd love to see that. By the way, Boyd's a free agent for them. This would be their next Boyd. But the point being, if we can effectively take out every team's number 1 and every team's number 2 options, we already brought in Keanu O'Neal with the sole assumption that he can delete tight ends. And he has a history of showing that. So we're looking at slot receivers taking, or the number 3 receiver on the roster, slaying us week in and week out. That ain't going to happen. I mean, the one thing about our defense is they adjust, and they adjust very well. Sure, there have been teams with elite number 2 receivers last year that torched us. That's what Buffalo did. That's how Philly did it. But there ain't a single number 3 receiver out there that mess with. Again, the argument can be made, well, they didn't have to. But if they are forced to, teams aren't built to go through their number 3 receiver. I mean, once you realistically factor in that receivers take themselves off the field regularly for just, spelling a play or so, you're looking at the Ray McLeod and Krzyzewski's of the world. Like, no, we should never have been giving them the ball. We'd love other people to give them the ball against us because it's going to be a complete another win. And this really comes back to the nail in the coffin of yesterday's episode. If we can do that, and we take teams down to immediately panicking because they're going to get sacked, so they're throwing at the line of scrimmage essentially, or getting in a Gonzalez and taking with Peterson also the 1 and 2 receiving options off the field, teams aren't going to be able to put 17 up against us. Canada ain't going to be able to put 17 up for us. This is a way to win it. Is it going to be awesome football? It is if you like hitting people hard. But it's not going to be for fantasy world. But defense wins championships. We know that better than basically any other city. Defense wins championships. And at the end of the day, that is why I'm okay with either one. My bias, seeing how important the pass rush is to the Steelers, is to go to the defensive linemen. I know there's all that off the field baggage, which I'm not really sure if I want. I'm just talking about on the field. And it's basically because I have seen how hard it has been for the Steelers to try to replace Tuitt. And Tuitt was the number 2 next to Cam. One day, we are going to wake up to a Cam Hayward retirement press conference. That is a completely scary as hell thought if it's the roster we have right now. This team is unfunctionable without Cam Hayward. That's why I went with Cam for today's jersey, because he is the center point. So again, and we don't trade up. We ain't getting him. We ain't even getting the one from Clemson. So the discussion becomes moot at that point, as long as we don't take Joey Porter Jr., which, again, watch the previous episodes from last week. The one from Pitt is going to be no good. Joey Porter's going to be no good. So therefore, there's other options out there. I love the idea of trading up more and more that I'm diving into this draft. The caveat with trading up, and this is the last point I wanted to talk about, this is the trade-up discussion, is that I do not want to trade away next year's assets. If we move one of the extra second picks and we go, you know what, we're going for the moon, here is 1 in 32, I'm okay with that. Because essentially it was a luxury pick anyway. And again, if we're getting one of those 2 defensive studs, game's over. It don't really matter what we do the rest of the draft. We've already won the draft. If it requires R1 this year and R1 next year, I'm not entertaining that. I'm not even entertaining R2 next year. And the reason is that when I look around the NFL, there are 2 major reasons not to trade future draft capital. The first and foremost is you need it. Yes, like half of the first rounders and 2/3 of the second rounders will bust. That's true. But you need the cheap capital at a long-term rate. And the 4 years at the NFL is a long-term rate. Because the other end of this trend spectrum was that the free agency world, for the last 2 years especially, has shifted the median contract. Means what does the majority of the guys sign? It's a less than 2-year deal. Now, we don't see it that much because all of our signings last year were all 2 years. But when we look at the league overall, aside from like the top 15% of free agents, basically everyone's doing a 1-year deal. So the reason that that's significant is because there's never been more turnover. So if you don't have a base, players are willing to shift around and shift around quickly. It's how you can get a brand new offensive line overnight, which is fine when it works. But in general, those things tend not to work building your team through free agency. But the other part is that having at least a base of saying, we got 10 quality guys that we know are here for 3 years. To be able to do that successfully in this cap era has to be done through the draft. And you have to be successful in your first 3 rounds. Really your first 2 rounds, and then maybe get lucky from the 3rd round on. But the reality is that you have 45 people that dress every Sunday. And you need to have at least half of them be on their rookie contract. Or on a completely manageable, bring them in type deal. Like we did with Edmonds last year. And the reason for that is that this team is structured to pay its superstars and keep them forever. And you want Watt. There's no way we don't. But that means for the rest of the cap to work, we need to have the draft capital to do it. And if you start trading away 1st and 2nd round picks in the future, you end up causing problems. Because the other issue there is the guy you're trading up for, you might not be able to afford because you had to spend too much free agency dollars on the in-between period to get you by. And it just creates a risk profile that is not successful at all. So Steelers Nation, that was a little bit of an extra half video I put in right there about the draft and trading up there. Again, I'm all for it. I'm all for it, especially with Gonzalez being as one of the options. It would be so amazing. However, you got to keep it in this year's ledger. You can't be trading next year's draft capital, especially if it's a 1st or 2nd pick. So Steelers Nation, I thank you guys for being with me. Tomorrow is the players you have sent me in your comments. Love to discuss them. We'll be with you tomorrow, 7 p.m. Pittsburgh Steelers Syndicate. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go.